Marhaba. I want to talk a little bit more about imperatives in formal Arabic and some important exceptions that occur when we're working with verbs whose root, whose judr, contains a vowel or a hamza. Sometimes we refer to vowels that are part of roots in Arabic as weak letters because of their tendency to disappear or be modified. And that's what I want to address because some interesting and exceptional things happen in the imperative. For this video, I'm going to assume that you've spent some time studying the basic structure of the imperative. Feel free to go check that out if you need a refresher before you continue here. So if we have a form 1 verb whose judr, whose root, begins with a waw or a hamza, we're going to drop that letter. And we'll have no helping vowel at the beginning, and we'll retain the vowel of the present tense conjugation of the verb in the imperative. Then we would just keep our regular majzoom ending, or think of it differently, we would add these regular imperative endings to what's left of our verb. So let's take a look at some examples. We have this verb akhadha, take, in the past tense. So if I want to tell someone, take this book, for example, in the present tense, we conjugate akhadha, let's go with huwa, conjugation. Ya'khudh. Well, we know that in the imperative, I'm going to drop that suffix. And because the hamza is the first letter of the root, I'm going to drop the hamza. And so I'm just left with khudh. And that's our imperative for masculine singular. Khudh al-kitab, khudh al-akl, take whatever you want. And then if I were going to conjugate it for a subject other than enta, masculine, singular, second person, I would just add a regular ending. So, enti, my ending is e, so I would say khudhi, or all of you take something. I could say khudhu, same principle. Another situation, same thing, wada'a is a fusha verb meaning to put, in the sense of putting something in a place, on a table, on the ground, etc. So, in the present tense, we actually drop the waw as well. So it's sort of taken care of us if we're going through the steps from the past to the present to the imperative. We just need to drop that ya, but we're not going to replace the waw in the imperative, and we're just going to wind up with da. Same thing if we wanted to say you, enti, feminine, put something, put the book on the table, da'i al-kitab ala tawila, etc. If we have a verb whose middle letter, whose middle root letter, I should say, is a vowel, then sometimes we're going to need to leave that vowel out of the imperative. For example, qala. If you know the present tense of qala, you'll know that this alif is actually a stand-in for a waw, which is the root letter. Alif is never a letter of a judr. It's never really a root letter. It might represent one, but in this case, the judr of this verb is qaf, waw, lam. So if we're making our imperative, we drop the prefix, or I suppose for enta it would be taqul, not yaqul. Here we have qul, and you might be thinking, this looks okay, this is good, we can work with this, but there is an issue. Because this verb is conjugated, is based off of the majzoom, the lam is going to have a sukoon on it, and the qaf is going to have a dhamma, leading into that waw, but then the waw has a sukoon too, and in formal Arabic, we have a rule that we can't have two consecutive letters right next to each other that both have sukoon, so something has to give. And the solution is that we just drop that waw. We retain the sound of the waw in that dhamma. But for the imperative, masculine singular, we would say qul, short with no long oo sound. Just qul, not qul. Notice though, that in any of the other conjugations of the imperative, since we're going to have some sort of vowel at the end, most of them, not all of them. The ones with vowels here, we can replace the vowel again because we have more vowel sounds afterwards. For example, if we want to say feminine singular, you say something, we add that E at the end, and because we have this kasra leading into the ya, we can retain the waw. It's not the two sukun problem again. The one exception would be if we were addressing a group of grammatically feminine individuals where we would have na as our conjugation, and once again we would have the same problem if we started with qul and then added a na. Well, the waw and the lam both have sukun, so something has to give once again, so we would drop the waw. Main takeaway again is that two sukuns can't be next to each other on two consecutive letters in formal Arabic. Let's take another example. This is getting a little bit messy, but if we wanted to use nam instead, well, in present tense, we would say enta, excuse me, enta tanem, for example. And if we drop the ta, we have the same issue, too many hamzas, so we retain the sound of that alif, but we don't leave it visually in there. And we just say nam, sleep. Once again though, if we were going to conjugate it from most other subjects, we could retain that. Well, we just need to think about sukuns. Finally, if we were going to work with a verb that has the last letter of its judr as a vowel, we might need to change and modify that vowel. Haka is a past tense verb meaning tell, in the sense of tell a story, or sometimes speak in colloquial. And in the present tense it's yahki. But when we're dealing with the masculine, singular, and plural conjugations, that ya is going to disappear. We're going to drop our prefix, and because the ha has a sukoon, we need, again, if you've reviewed the imperative, you remember that we need a vowel at the start of a word. We can't have a letter that starts with sukoon. So we're going to add a kasra here, and for the masculine conjugation, we're going to drop that ya and just have a kaf with a short kasra. Ihki, not ihki. That would be our feminine conjugation. Enta ihki, enti ihki, if we're addressing someone feminine. So visually we can tell the two apart. One other thing though, if we're talking to entum and saying, all of you, tell me the story, for example, we're going to drop that ya once again and add our plural conjugation of u, so we wind up with ihku. Oh, I forgot my alif there. Ihku. Remember that Arabic does not like you as a vowel combination. It sounds gross to us in English, right? You. So if we had our ya in there, we would have that unpleasant vowel combination, and the solution is just to drop it. Ihku. In colloquial Arabic, in speech, things tend to be a bit simpler. We can get away with leaving the middle vowel in a verb like qala yaqul, for example, and I can say ul in Shami or in Masri. And similarly, I can address a man in Levantine Arabic and say, talk with me, ihki ma'i, and we're going to hear that longer vowel. But when we are writing informal Arabic, these are the rules that we need to know in order to compose our words correctly and spell them accurately.